The space station Conclave Verath floated in the dark between three star systems. It was the biggest structure ever built by many hands together. Dozens of species had put their tools and their workers into it over 200 years. Its halls were wide enough for creatures the size of small buildings. Its air could be adjusted in each room to suit whatever species was breathing it. Its lights could shift from deep red to pale blue depending on who needed to see. It was, in simple terms, the most important place in the known galaxy. And today, for the first time, humans were coming to it. The docking bay on level 7 was crowded, not because anyone had been ordered to watch, because word had spread on its own, the way strange news always does. Creatures pressed against the observation windows, some with 4 eyes, some with none, some with faces that did not look like faces at all. They all wanted to see the humans arrive. There had been talk about humans for years. Long before Earth had faster-than-light travel, alien probes had been watching the blue planet from a careful distance. The reports that came back were strange, confusing, sometimes hard to believe. The humans were small, soft-bodied, no natural armor, no claws worth noting, no venom, no ability to survive in the cold of open space without layers of equipment. Their bones broke easily compared to most species. Their skin was almost embarrassingly thin. And yet the probes kept sending back images of a species that refused to stop. A species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and kept rebuilding. A species that had looked at a world full of things that could kill them and had decided slowly, across millions of years, to outlast all of it. But seeing old reports was one thing, seeing them in person was another. The docking signal blinked green. The human ship, small, clean, not heavily armed, attached to the port with a soft mechanical click. The doors opened. 5 people walked out. Just 5. The crowd at the observation windows went very quiet. General Karath of the Vrethkai stood at the front of the official welcoming line. He was 7 feet tall. His body was covered in thick dark scales that had stopped bladed weapons before. His arms were long and heavy, the bones inside them reinforced by a second layer of natural calcium that grew harder as he aged. He had been in 43 battles. He had won all of them. He looked at the 5 humans walking across the docking floor and felt something he did not expect. He felt amused. They were so small. The tallest one barely reached his chest. They walked upright on 2 legs which already looked unstable to him. They wore simple dark clothing. No armor plates, no energy weapons on their hips, no combat units waiting behind them. One of them was carrying a flat data screen under her arm like it was a shopping item. The lead human was a man with gray at his temples and calm brown eyes. He walked with the ease of someone who was not nervous. His name, Karath had been told, was Ambassador Joran Hale. Behind him came 2 younger humans' aides, clearly. Then a woman with short dark hair who was listed in the official manifest as the security attaché. Her name was Commander Sira Voss. She was the smallest of the 5. She was also the only one who was not looking at the welcoming committee. She was looking at the room. Her eyes moved slowly across the walls, the exits, the positions of every body in the space. She did not look worried. She looked like someone reading a very familiar book. Karath noticed her for exactly 1 second, then dismissed her from his thoughts. The official greeting began. Representatives from 12 species gave short speeches of welcome. Translator devices hummed quietly at everyone's ears. Ambassador Hale responded with a short, polite address that said the right things without saying anything too specific. He was good at that, Karath could tell. A diplomat's diplomat. When the formalities were done, the group moved into the main reception hall. Long tables had been set up with food and drink from many worlds. Soft lighting pulsed in the ceiling. The noise of dozens of conversations filled the air. Karath moved through the crowd toward the human group. He was not planning to be subtle. He stopped in front of Ambassador Hale and looked down at him from his full height. Several nearby conversations stopped. People turned to watch without pretending otherwise. Ambassador, Kareth said, his translator keeping his deep voice in smooth human syllables. I have read the files on your people. I have read them carefully. Hale smiled. I hope they were accurate. They said your species has no natural weapons. Kareth let his eyes travel slowly over the 5 humans. Looking at you now, I believe that part. A few quiet sounds came from the watching crowd. Not quite laughter, not quite discomfort, something in between. Hale's smile did not move. We've always made do, he said simply. Kareth stepped closer. He was not threatening, not technically. He was just standing in the way that his species stood when they wanted to make a point with their body instead of their words. Made do, he repeated. Yes, I suppose small creatures must find ways to survive. We do not hold it against you. That's generous, Hale said. Behind Hale, Sira Voss had stopped looking around the room. She was looking at Kareth now, still no expression on her face, just watching, like she was noting something down in her head. Kareth glanced at her. Your security person, he said. She is very small even for a human. She does her job well, Hale said. I am sure she does. Kareth's tone made it clear he thought the job was probably very easy. We in the Vrethkai believe that a civilization's strength can be seen in the warriors it sends to represent itself. You have sent 5 people, no weapons, no soldiers. He spread his large hands slightly. Either you trust the peace here very deeply, or you did not think it mattered what you brought. There was a silence. Hale took a small sip from his cup. Or, he said, we brought exactly what we needed. Kareth stared at him. Then he made a short sound, not a laugh exactly, but close enough, and moved away through the crowd. He spoke loudly as he went, not bothering to lower his voice. They send their soft ones, he announced to the room around him, to nobody in particular and everybody at once. They're unarmed ones. Either they are fools or they do not understand what negotiation means among the stars. Several species in the hall shifted. Some looked at the humans with something like pity, some with curiosity. One delegate from the Ludi, a graceful insectoid creature with pale wings folded neatly at her back, looked at the humans with an expression that was harder to read. Her name was Thessiv, and she had done a great deal more research on humans than most. She looked at Sira Voss. She looked at the way the small human woman stood, relaxed, perfectly balanced on both feet, hands loose at her sides. Thessiv thought, there is something wrong with the way we are all reading this room. Across the hall, Sira Voss picked up a cup of water from a passing tray, took a slow drink, and kept watching everything with quiet, patient eyes. She did not say a word. She did not need to, not yet. The next morning on Conclave Verath began the way most mornings on the station did, with the slow hum of air systems adjusting, lights shifting from night cycle dim to day cycle white, and the sound of dozens of species beginning their routines in their separate quarters. The humans had been given a set of rooms on level 4. The rooms were comfortable, sized for their bodies, and very quiet. Ambassador Hale had been awake since what would have been early morning back on Earth. He sat at the small desk in his room going through files, a plain cup of coffee cooling beside his hand. There was a soft knock at his door. He opened it and found Thessiv standing in the corridor. She was nearly as tall as a human adult, but thinner, her 4 arms folded neatly in a posture her species used to show that they were not there for trouble. Her large compound eyes caught the light in small pieces. Ambassador Hale, she said quietly, I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, Hale said. He stepped back and gestured for her to come in. She entered carefully and stood near the far wall, keeping space between them the way the Ludi always did with species they did not know well. It was a sign of respect, not distance. I wanted to speak with you before the morning session, she said. There is something you need to understand about what General Karath said last night. Hale sat on the edge of his desk. I understood it clearly enough. Perhaps, Thesiv's wings shifted slightly at her back, a Ludi habit when they were nervous, but perhaps not all of it. What Karath did last night was not just rudeness. Among the Vrethkai, speaking those words publicly, calling a delegation weak, calling them soft, questioning what they brought, it is the first step of something formal. Hale was quiet for a moment. Tell me. Thesiv explained the right of standing. It was old, older than the conclave itself, older than most of the agreements that held the station together. It came from the Vrethkai home world, from a time when disputes between groups were settled not with long arguments but with a single physical contest. One champion from each side. Simple rules. The one who made the other yield won the right. The species that lost the right was classified by Vrethkai tradition, and by a very old clause buried in the conclave's founding documents, as a lesser civilization, one that had not yet earned full standing. In practice, that meant losing their vote, their seat at the table, their voice in any decision that affected their world. It has not been invoked in 11 years, Thesiv said, but it can be, and after what Karath said last night in a room full of witnesses, he has the right to formally invoke it against your people before the morning session ends. Hale looked at her steadily. Will he? Yes, she said simply. I believe he will. He does not think you can win. His champion, a soldier named Urath, has fought the right 6 times. He has never lost. He broke the arm of the Drevathi champion. He fractured 3 bones in the Salan delegate's chest. He is not just strong, he is trained. He knows how to end a fight very quickly. The room was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Hale said, for telling me. Thesiv looked at him carefully. You do not seem frightened. I'm not, he said. May I ask why? Hale picked up his coffee cup, found it cold, and set it back down. Because I trust the person I'll name as our champion. Thesiv's compound eyes moved slowly. The small woman, your security attaché. Yes. She is very small, Thesiv said carefully. It was not an insult, it was a fact she was trying to process. Urath is nearly twice her mass, his grip strength alone. I know, Hale said. I've read his file too. Thesiv was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I hope you know what you are doing, Ambassador, and left. The morning session opened in the main conclave chamber, a wide circular room with tiered seating for every registered species. Light came from a ring above the central floor. The air was set to a neutral blend that nobody loved and nobody hated. Karath moved to the floor before the session formally opened. He did not ask for the speaking position. He simply walked to the center of the room and stood there until the room noticed him and went quiet. That was how the Vrethkai did things. He spoke for less than 2 minutes. He named the right of standing. He named humanity as the challenged party. He pointed out, in clear and simple language that the translator sent to every ear in the room, that no species without a champion willing to stand and contest the Vrethkai had ever been granted full voting rights in the conclave. He said that he was not trying to be cruel. He was simply upholding a tradition that existed for a reason. Strength is not a cruelty, he said. It is a measure. The galaxy is not safe. The conclave is not a charity. Full standing should belong to those who can defend it. The chamber was very still. Ambassador Hale rose from the human delegation seats. Every eye in the room moved to him. The human delegation accepts the right of standing, he said. A low sound moved through the room. Not panic, not shock, something softer, a collective breath. Karath nodded slowly, as if he had expected this and found it almost admirable. Name your champion, Ambassador. Hale did not pause. Commander Siravas, he said. The room did not just go quiet this time. It went completely still in the particular way that happens when something unexpected cuts through all the noise and leaves nothing in its place. Heads turned. Eyes found Sira where she sat at the edge of the human delegation section. She was leaning forward slightly, elbows on her knees, looking at the floor of the chamber in front of her. When Hale said her name, she looked up. She did not look surprised. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who had been waiting for a bus that had finally arrived. She stood up. From across the chamber, Ureth the Unbroken looked at her. He was broad-shouldered, built like something that had been designed specifically to break things. He had 3 long scars down the left side of his face from a fight on his home world when he was young. He had been the Vrethkai champion for 40 years. He looked at Sira the way a mountain looks at a stone someone has placed at its base, without concern and without interest. Then he laughed. It was a low sound, but the room was so quiet it carried everywhere. Sira did not react. She just stood there with her hands loose at her sides and watched him with the same quiet, patient eyes she had used to watch everything since she arrived on the station. Thesiv, sitting in the Ludai section, looked from Ureth to Sira and then back again. Her wings pressed tight against her back. Her 4 hands found each other and held on. She did not know what was going to happen. But she had a feeling, small and strange and not quite formed yet, that the rest of the room was reading this very, very wrong. The contest was set for the following morning. That gave Sira 1 evening. She spent the first part of it alone in her room, sitting on the floor with her legs crossed and her eyes closed. She was not sleeping. She was not praying. She was going through the fight in her head, not imagining winning, but imagining every moment of it, every possible move, every possible problem. She had learned to do this years ago from a trainer who told her that the body follows the mind, and the mind needs to have already been somewhere before the body gets there. She had been thinking about Vrethkai physiology for 3 days. At some point, a soft knock came at her door. She already knew who it was. She had heard the particular light rhythm of those 4 small hands against the door earlier in the day and had filed it away. She opened the door. Thesiv stood in the corridor, holding a small container of something warm that smelled faintly like flowers and earth. "I brought something from the Ludai kitchen," Thesiv said. "We drink it when we cannot sleep." "I wasn't sleeping," Sira said. "I know, may I come in?" Sira stepped aside. Thesiv entered and looked around the room, at the single bag Sira had unpacked, at the small mat on the floor where she had clearly been sitting, at the way the room contained almost no clutter at all. It looked like the room of someone who was ready to leave at any moment. They sat down, Thesiv in the chair, Sira back on the floor. Thesiv poured 2 small cups and set one near Sira's knee. Sira did not pick it up right away. "You are not afraid," Thesiv said. It was not a question this time. She had already asked that of Ambassador Hale. Now she was saying it to Sira directly, like a fact she was still trying to make sense of. "I've been afraid before," Sira said. "This doesn't feel like those times." "Ureth is very strong," Thesiv said. "I know. He will try to grab you. If he gets both hands on you properly, he can." "Break me in half," Sira said without any particular emotion. "Yes, I know that too." Thesiv stared at her. "Then why?" "Can I ask you something first?" Sira said. "Of course. When you researched humans, when your people, or the Conclave, or anyone here looked into what we are, what did they focus on?" Thesiv thought about it honestly. "Your technology, your history, your governments and your wars, how fast your ships travel, how many weapons your military has. And our bodies." A pause. "The report said you were fragile, soft tissue, breakable bones, limited strength compared to most species." Sira nodded slowly. "That's what most people see when they look at us," she said. "And most of it is true. Compared to Ureth, I am fragile. He could hit me once and do serious damage." She turned her cup around in her fingers. "But there are things the reports probably didn't say." Thesiv leaned forward just slightly. "Humans evolved on a planet that was trying to kill us," Sira said. Her voice was even and plain, like she was explaining the weather. Not just trying, actively, constantly, for millions of years. Things with claws and venom and teeth and strength that made ours look like nothing. And we didn't win because we got stronger. We won because we got smarter about how to use what we had. "What do you have?" Thesiv asked carefully. Sira held up her right hand. Thesiv looked at it, 5 fingers, a thumb that bent across the palm, nothing special. "By the look of it." "The human hand," Sira said, "is one of the most precise instruments on our planet. The grip, the angle of the thumb, the way the knuckles sit over dense bone. We can catch a throw, build a machine, write a letter, and break a nose all with the same hand. It took millions of years to make it that way." She set the hand back in her lap. "And I've spent 19 years learning exactly how to use it." She told Thesiv plainly, without pride but without modesty either, what those 19 years had been. The training systems, the study of joint mechanics, the discipline of finding the exact point on a body where small force, applied precisely, could overcome large force applied generally. She had trained under teachers from different human fighting systems, but she had also studied alien xenobiology the way a surgeon studies anatomy. Not out of aggression, out of preparation. "Vrethkai joints," she said, "are built for forward force, straight lines. Their bone reinforcement runs along the length of the limb, not across it, which means they are very hard to break by pushing. But if you apply torque, rotation, side pressure against the natural axis of the joint." She made a slow twisting motion with both hands. "The reinforcement works against them. It makes the joint rigid in the wrong direction." Thesiv was very still. "Their wrists," Sira said. "Specifically, the lateral axis. I've run the angles. I know the degree of pressure needed. I know how to get there from a grab, which is what Ureth will do, because that's what every species does when they think they have you." The room was quiet. Thesiv said very softly, "You were never the soft ones, were you?" It was not a question. Sira looked at her for a moment. Then, for the first time since arriving on Conclave Verath, she smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, but real. "We just look that way," she said. She picked up the cup Thesiv had brought and finally drank from it. It tasted like a cool morning and something faintly sweet. After Thesiv left, Sira sat alone for a little while longer. She went back through the fight in her head, slower this time, more deliberate. She thought about Ureth's reach. She thought about the first 5 seconds, which were always the most dangerous. She thought about the hit she was probably going to take before she could get inside his guard, and whether she would stay standing through it. She had taken hits before. She had a very clear memory of the first time a trainer had hit her hard enough to make her vision go white. She had been 22. She had sat on the floor of the gym for a full minute trying to decide if she wanted to get back up. She had gotten up. She had kept getting up every time after that, until getting up stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like just the next thing that happened. That was the thing the reports never captured. Not the bones, not the muscle, not the hands. The part of a human being that simply did not know how to accept the word done. She pulled a roll of white tape from her bag and began to wrap her wrists tight, neat, practiced. Her hands moved without her having to think about it. Tomorrow, Ureth the Unbroken would find out what an unarmed human actually meant. Not weak. Differently dangerous. The contest floor of Conclave Verath was on level 2, at the very center of the station. It was a circular space, 30 meters across, with a smooth pale floor and walls that curved up into tiered viewing areas on all sides. Every seat was full. Representatives from more than 30 species had come to watch. Some stood because their bodies did not sit. Some pressed against the barrier rails at the front of the gallery. A few had brought recording devices, which was technically against protocol, but nobody was enforcing it today. The air was set neutral. The lights were bright and even. There were no shadows anywhere on the floor. Sira stood at one edge of the circle. She wore the same dark clothing she had arrived in, no padding, no protective gear, no added equipment of any kind. Her wrists were taped under her sleeves. Her dark hair was pulled back. She stood with her feet slightly apart and her hands loose at her sides, and she looked at the center of the floor the way a craftsperson looks at a piece of work they are about to begin. Across the circle, Urath the Unbroken stood at the other edge. He was everything his file said he was, broad at the shoulder in a way that made the air around him seem smaller. His scales were the deep gray-green of old stone. His arms hung at his sides and they were longer than Sira's entire body from shoulder to hip. His hands were the size of her head. He had fought the right 6 times and he wore those victories without expression, the way very heavy things wear their weight. He looked at Sira once when she entered the floor. Then he looked away. He stretched his neck slowly to one side, then the other, the thick muscles there moving under his scales like rope. He was not nervous. He was not even particularly focused. He was doing the thing that very strong, very experienced fighters sometimes do, treating the next fight as something that has already happened and whose result he already knows. In the gallery, the room was quiet in the sharp way that only comes before something. Thesiv sat in the Ludi section with all 4 of her hands pressed together. She had told 3 of her colleagues what Sira had told her the night before. 2 of them had looked at her with polite uncertainty. One had simply said, "She is very small." Thesiv had not argued, she had just watched the floor. The conclave official at the edge of the circle gave the start signal, a single tone from a small device at his wrist. Urath moved immediately. He did not charge the way a reckless fighter charges, all speed and no thought. He moved fast but with control, crossing the distance between them in long, low strides, his arms rising to close off angles of retreat. He had done this before. He knew how small opponents thought. They moved back. They tried to create distance, and then he simply ran them down. Sira did not move back. She moved sideways sharply, low, angling to her right, and the space where she had been standing was suddenly empty. Urath adjusted, faster than most expected, and his right arm swung out to catch her. The edge of his forearm caught her across the left shoulder. The sound of it was flat and hard. Several people in the gallery made noises. It was the kind of hit that ends fights in the first 10 seconds. It was the kind of hit that cracks bone and takes feeling away from an arm and puts an opponent on the floor. Sira's left side dropped. Her feet shifted. For 1 second she moved like something broken. Then she came back up. Her left arm hung lower than her right, and the way she held it was careful, but she was standing. She was moving. She rolled her shoulder once, very slightly, testing it, and then she was already circling, already repositioning, already putting Urath's right side between herself and his stronger left. In the gallery, the sound that came from the crowd was not cheering. It was something harder to name, a collective noise of people recalculating. Urath pressed forward again. He was more focused now. The hit had landed and she was still there. That was new information. He reached for her, both arms this time, trying to close them around her and end it with a hold. Sira moved inside his reach. This was the thing that his body was not built to process. Every species Urath had fought instinctively moved away from his arms. Distance was safety. Distance made sense. But Sira moved toward him, into the space between his arms before they could close, and suddenly she was too close for his reach to matter. She was inside. Her right hand found his left wrist. Her left hand, the one from the hurt shoulder, the one she had been holding carefully, came up and locked over it from the other side. 2 hands, his one wrist, both her thumbs pressing down on the joint from above, her fingers wrapped underneath, her entire grip oriented along a very specific axis. Urath twisted, trying to pull away. He was enormously strong and he put all of it into pulling his wrist free. The torque of his own pull worked against him. Sira did not fight his strength. She let it run, guided it, angled it, added just enough rotation in the direction his wrist was not designed to bend, and she felt the joint give under her hands the way she had calculated it would. The crack was clean and sharp, and it rang across the silent arena. Ureth the Unbroken made a sound he had probably not made in 40 years, a short, hard sound of genuine pain. His knees bent, not all the way to the floor, not yet, but they bent. Sira kept her grip for exactly one more second, steady and precise, then stepped back and released him. Ureth stood with his wrist held against his chest. His face was an expression she had never seen on a Vrethkai, the particular blankness of someone who has just encountered something their whole life told them was impossible. He looked at her. She looked back at him. The conclave official's voice came across the room. The challenged party yields a yield position. Under the right of standing, the human champion holds the floor. The gallery was completely silent. Then from the Ludai section, a single set of 4 hands began to clap, quietly at first, then louder. Then the sound spread slowly, unevenly, species by species, until it was filling the room from every direction. Different hands made different sounds. Some clapped, some drummed on the rails, some made tones with their bodies that served the same purpose. It was loud and it was messy and it was real. Sira stood in the center of the floor. She did not raise her hands. She did not perform anything. She just stood there, breathing carefully through her nose, her left shoulder aching in a way she was going to need to deal with later. She had gotten up, she had kept going, she had done the next thing that needed doing. That was all it had ever been. At the edge of the gallery, General Kareth watched without moving. His face gave away nothing, but his eyes stayed on Sira for a long time after the room had begun to empty around him, long after Ureth had been helped from the floor, long after the official had made the formal announcement. He was thinking about something. He did not yet know what it was. But it had started. The formal session began 2 hours after the contest ended. The conclave chamber looked the same as always: tiered seats, bright lights, the soft hum of translator devices. But the feeling inside it was different. People sat differently. They spoke more quietly to each other before things started. There was the particular kind of attention in the room that comes after something has shifted and nobody has fully named it yet. General Kareth took the floor before Ambassador Hale could stand. He was controlled. His voice was level. He said that the contest had been irregular, that Sira Voss had used a technique that the Rite did not anticipate, that the founding documents of the Rite described a standing contest of strength, and that what had occurred on the floor was not, in the spirit of the tradition, a true test of that. He spoke for 4 minutes. He made his points carefully. When he finished, the room waited. The conclave's senior arbiter, a Dravathi elder with gray plating along her jaw, spoke for the committee. Her voice was slow and very precise. She said that the right of standing, as written in the founding documents, required one champion to make the other yield. It did not specify how. It did not restrict technique, method, or body position. It required only that both champions be on the floor at the start and that no external weapons be used. Every condition had been met. The result stands, she said. The human delegation retains full voting rights and standing in this conclave. General Kareth's challenge has been answered according to every rule that governs it. Kareth said nothing more. He returned to the Vrethkai section and sat down. The muscles in his jaw were tight. The session moved forward. Ambassador Hale's address was short, deliberately so. He did not speak about the contest. He did not make any reference to it at all. He spoke about what humanity wanted from its place in the conclave. Fair trade agreements, open exchange of scientific data, a process for resolving border questions in the outer systems, cooperation on navigational charts. Ordinary things, important things. The things that make the difference between people who share a galaxy and people who merely occupy the same one. He spoke for 12 minutes and then sat down. The session continued for several more hours without incident. It was late in the station's day cycle when Kareth found Sira. She was in one of the corridor sections near the outer hull, where long windows looked directly into open space. She stood with her arms crossed and her eyes on the dark outside. She was alone. Her left arm was held slightly lower than her right, carefully, like she was managing it. Anyone who looked closely could see the edge of medical tape through her sleeve. Kareth stopped several feet away from her. She had heard him coming, his footsteps were not quiet, and she turned to look at him. She waited. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window, not at her. "I want to ask you something," he said at last. "Go ahead," she said. "After my soldier hit you," he said, "in the first few seconds of the contest," he paused, "how much pain were you in?" She looked at him for a moment before answering. "Enough," she said. He turned his head to look at her directly, and you continued. "Yes." "Why?" he asked it plainly, not as a challenge, as a genuine question, the kind that comes from someone who has fought many times and understands that there is a moment in every fight where continuing stops being automatic and becomes a choice. Sira looked back at the window. Outside, a slow-moving service drone drifted past, its small lights blinking. "Because stopping felt worse," she said. "It always does." Kareth considered this for a long time. He was a creature who thought before he spoke, and when he thought, his whole body became still in a way that made him seem like a different kind of thing than he had been in the chamber, or at the reception, or on the contest floor. "My species respects strength," he said finally. "We have always respected it. We built everything we are around it, our laws, our politics, our sense of what a civilization should be." He paused again. "We did not consider that strength could look the way you look." Sira did not say anything. "We were wrong," he said. "It came out simply. No ceremony around it, just the flat truth of it placed down between them." She looked at him. "You weren't entirely wrong," she said. "I am soft compared to Ureth. Compared to most things out here, humans are fragile. That part is true. But fragile doesn't mean finished," she said. "It just means we learn to be careful about where we put our force." Another long quiet. Kareth looked at the bandage edge visible at her wrist. "Your shoulder," he said. "It was damaged in the contest." "Yes." "And you said nothing." "Saying something wouldn't have fixed it," she said. He made a sound then, low, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl, something between the two. She had the sense it was the sound his species made when they encountered something they had not expected but found themselves unable to dismiss. He left without saying anything else. When the conclave voted the following morning on the resolution to formally grant humanity full standing membership, with voting rights, a permanent seat, and representation in the Outer Systems Committee, the final count was announced by the arbiter. 31 delegations voted yes, 0 voted no. The Vrethkai delegation abstained. For any other species in the room, an abstention was merely the absence of a vote. For the Vrethkai, who had opposed every new species' full membership in their recorded history, it was something else entirely. Every delegate in the room understood that. They had all read enough history to know what it meant when the Vrethkai simply did not raise their hand against you. It meant they had decided you were worth leaving alone. It meant something close to respect. That evening, Sira stood on the observation deck on level 8, the highest point of the station where visitors were allowed. The window there was enormous, a full arc of reinforced glass that let you see the stars without a frame around them. She stood there for a long time. Her shoulder had been seen to by the station's medical staff, wrapped properly, given something for the pain. She stood with her good arm across her body and her hurt arm hanging easy, and she looked at the dark. She thought about nothing specific, just the stars, just the fact of them, just the quiet after everything that had happened. The door behind her opened once, Thesiv, briefly, who came and stood beside her without speaking and then left after a few minutes, which was exactly right. Then she was alone again. She had done what she came to do. She had done it the only way she knew how, by knowing the work, preparing for it, taking the hit and not stopping. Tomorrow there would be meetings, agreements to begin, details to sort through. The slow, careful work of building a real place for humanity among the stars. But tonight the stars were enough. She stayed until the lights shifted to the night cycle. Then she turned, walked back through the corridor and went asleep. In the morning, the work would begin. She was ready.